I moved into my new house about a year or two ago. I had lived in the area for a year before we were evicted due to the owners of our old house wanting to move in. I'm a young female still living with my family, which makes this story even more weird. Now, when you look out my window, you see my fence and then a house. They are up on a small hill, so the fence does not block anything. The first encounter that I had with this man was late at night. I was with some friends while all of our parents were out at a party. I would say that me and my friends are old enough to be left at home. We were fairly responsible. We were just relaxing in my room with no light or music on. We had turned the TV off when we were alone. We heard my dog start barking for a good 10 minutes. We passed this off because she barked at absolutely everything. I'm talking birds in the power line, bug on the front porch, anything that moves pretty much. We started hearing weirder noises like crunching circling the perimeter of my room and scratching on the walls. I kid you not. The moment that we start getting scared, the loudest bangs that I've ever heard start pounding on my glass sliding door. Me and the 3 others run out of my room to go look at what in the world could be making this much noise. We were greeted by an aggressive dog. This dog was up on the glass, pounding on the door. My dog was scared. She usually doesn't do this, but she backed away behind me into my room, with all of her fur on end. And then we see it. A man dressed in all black standing at the door. We were all standing perfectly still, but I guess my friend's flight response went off. And just as she jumped to lock the door, the man reached for it too. My friend yelled, "What are you doing here? Who are you?" He responded with the simple, "I don't know," and walked off with his dog who was on a leash. When our parents got back, I told them about him. They asked us why we didn't call them. Truthfully, I know that we should have, but I didn't want to ruin my mom's birthday party. I have learned from this though. 2 days later, my mom confronted our neighbor who was mowing the lawn. He said that it was in fact him and that his dog had run into our gate and he got the dog back. He said that he meant to come and talk to her earlier about it, but he didn't. I thought it was a normal story until I thought back to that night. The gate that his dog supposedly ran through had a tough clasp that was shut on that night. We have it there so our dog can't get out and so nothing can come in, but you can open it by hand. Meaning that this man opened the gate and let himself and his dog inside. My theory is that he heard the music stop and didn't see lights from his house, and so he decided that he was going to come and, I don't know, rob us. The noises that we heard must have been him, scaling the perimeter of my room for 10 minutes before attempting to enter. And we filed a police report and nothing happened for a few months until one night. I was in bed almost asleep but still getting comfy. I sat up to rearrange my pillows and turned around so I could properly make it comfy, when I saw a face outside my window staring back at me. Whoever it was wearing a black face covering, and I texted my mom and froze. I heard moving and then my mom came and checked, but there was nothing there now. This wasn't just my imagination, as my neighbor's lights are visible from the crack in my curtain, but the face was covering a majority of the light. Ever since then, I've noticed them watching, and whenever I catch them looking, they get up from their balcony and they leave. But I'll catch them in the same spot watching only 5 minutes later. And during my sophomore year in high school, I was unfortunately involved in a terrifying event at my school. It happened during lunchtime, and I'll never forget what unfolded in front of me. Right before the bell rang, I heard what sounded like somebody slamming lockers as hard as they could. The noise echoing through the halls, and before anybody could think, a kid ran down the hall screaming, "He has a gun!" Now mind you, it was close to the end of the year, so sadly a lot of us thought that it was a messed up senior prank. The reason I say this is because over the past few months we've had kids apparently posting on Facebook that they were going to do this to the school. Therefore we had police officers in our classrooms, guarding us non-stop throughout the second semester. So when it actually happened, we didn't know if it was real or fake. Our security guard, who was previously a sniper in the military, ran down the hallway to see what was happening. Not even a minute later, he comes running back to tell us to run, and we did. Kids were jumping over tables, jumping over each other, and teachers were trying to pull kids into their classrooms. Everything broke loose the moment that we realized this meant life or death, and all I could think about was, where's my sister? She had left for the bathroom moments before the first shots rang out, and I remember not knowing what to do. Do I find her or do I hide because the gunman was coming right for me? And so I ran as fast as I could up the stairs and into my fourth period class. The teacher, I remember everybody was staring at me, like what was going on? Are you okay? And that's when the principal got on the intercom, and I'll never forget what he said. This is a code red, hide your students. I repeat, this is not a drill. Hide your students. I didn't even have to say a word. The senior class I ran into took action. They barricaded the door with the desks and chairs after pulling in as many students as they could. The teacher told us to turn off all our phone sounds but to text our parents. When I did, my mom so happened to be right around the corner from the school. She raced over despite me telling her that it wasn't safe. I felt like I could have gotten my mom killed that day, and I still regret it, though she remained safe. A lot after that is a blur. I remember my sister texting me and telling me that she was safe, but that the gunman was trying to get into their classroom. I remember hearing the SWAT team clearing the hallways and hearing on one of the radios that there were multiple suspects, but none could be found. I remember seeing on a multiple Snapchats, teachers next to doors ready to take action. Some had scissors, others had baseball bats, and another showed students taking off their shoes, ready to attack anyone who entered without permission. Though being slightly wholesome, the school of people should never have to defend themselves against angry classmates with guns. That was something that should have never happened, especially on a day that our guard was down. Long story short, we were on lockdown from 1:45 p.m. to 10 p.m. that night. The shooters were never found as far as I know, and nobody was fatally injured. Thank God. Walking out, though, to see food and papers scattering the hallways was rough. We had to have our hands up in the air as we left the school, and before going outside, we were all patted down to make sure that we didn't have any weapons. My parents hugged me harder than ever before, and me just being happy that we all walked out to see another day. I dropped out of high school shortly after that and moved back to my hometown 5 states away. I lived with my brother for a bit until I got my own place, and that's when I met Devin. He was like 3 years older than me, and I never realized that he was my first grade crush's older brother, but there we were. He was pretty good friends with my brother, and they would hang out when we would have kickbacks. I can't say that he was a bad guy from what I saw, and he never had beef with anyone. A super laid-back stoner type of guy. He was really cool until we all got drunk one night and it slipped that he almost shot up his high school. Now everybody there pretty much knew this about him, but played it off as well. He didn't actually do it, so even my brother. I was disgusted when I told him what happened to me, and they dropped him from the friend group pretty fast. It's just sad that it took me telling them that I was actually involved in one to no longer be friends with him. Like, people, you shouldn't have been friends with him to begin with. Anyway, so I moved again and no longer talked to any of those friends, including my brother, and that's something that I'm not sorry about. It's been almost 10 years and I'm slowly moving on. I just wish the trend of validating other people's bad behavior would stop. It's not a game, and if you ever feel the need to take these drastic actions, please don't. It's not worth ruining your life and others. You have a chance to make things right, so please do it. This story happened a while ago, but it still messes with my mind. A side note, I live in a quiet countryside village where there's usually nothing happening. I'm an 18-year-old girl who can easily walk around my hometown alone without ever being scared because it's really safe here. There's basically no crime. So, as usual, me and my dog went for a walk one evening. It was nice weather outside, so I decided to go to a nearby field. I usually let my dog off of her leash there so that it was fun for the both of us. She's a nice dog and always comes when I call for her. We get to the field and everything's going really well and nothing seems off. Except that I have this kind of odd feeling in my gut that I never usually have. The last time that I did, I was 8 years old and we were driving at night with my family. I told them how I felt and they decided to slow down because I was oddly serious at that moment. A minute after I said it, a deer came running out of nowhere and we would have crashed into it if we had been going the same speed as a minute before. We were all shocked and my mom thanked me. I still remember it like it was yesterday. However, in the field 10 years later, I had that same gut feeling. Whatever, I thought, and I kept going, completely ignoring it. We roll around the fields and a nearby forest until the sunset starts to go down. I put my dog back on her leash and decide to leave from one of the tiny pathways that go through a small forest. It's the quickest way to get back home. It's not a popular way, but it is quick. As I'm walking along that path, I suddenly spot a silhouette in the end of the road, just before the forest begins. I think nothing of it at that point and just keep walking, but after just a little while I have a strong gut feeling and I stare at the silhouette. I look for a while and that's when I notice that the silhouette is staring at me without moving. I just think that maybe they were waiting for someone because at first, the silhouette looked like a child's. But as I got closer, I noticed that it wasn't a child, but a grown man instead, who looked to be struggling while attempting to ride a children's bicycle. It was a blue and green boy's bicycle. His legs were way too long for it and his whole body looked like he was forcing himself to ride it. It was a really unsettling sight. But still, my idiot self didn't want to turn around and have a couple of kilometers of wasted time. And even though it was creepy looking at it, I still thought, hey, maybe he's waiting for somebody that's coming from my way. But every step that I took, he followed me with an intense expression. I'm only like 20 meters away from him when he starts to do these weird jumps on his bike, smiling the ugliest and most unsettling smile that I had ever seen, just staring at me with wide eyes. He kinda looks like he was expecting something and is so excited about it that he needs to jump. He looked like he had to be in his 50s or something, with very long and thin legs and arms, bald and that creepy unsettling smile. That's when my alarm rings went off. I glanced behind me and nobody was there, just me, an 18-year-old small girl with her fluffy, definitely not a guard dog. I did a 360 turn and started to jog from where I came, just in case. I glanced at him and sighed in relief when I noticed that he wasn't following me anymore. I thought that maybe he wasn't waiting for me after all, and I called myself a stupid and a scaredy cat. Oh, I was so wrong. My adrenaline started to slow down again as I was in the middle of the fields, and I still saw no sign of him following me. I let my dog off her leash again and she started to run around. I'm nearly at the end of the field. I only have a kilometer or so to the forest part before I get to my home after the field part. And that's when my dog spots a rabbit or a deer or some interesting thing and flies towards it. I panic because she had never done that before and I yell for her. I yell plenty of times for her loudly and finally she comes back. I'm relieved that nothing happened to her, but as I put her back on her leash, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. The freaky bald-looking guy with his long legs is biking towards me. He's not looking at the ground when he bikes, but at me. Freaking out wasn't enough to express my feeling in that moment. I have never seen a human who looks so crazy. More than crazy. What surprised me the most was that he was still biking though through a field. And I can tell you that it's not even an easy field to walk through sometimes. It has muddy ponds that you need to jump over, but that psycho just biked right through them. He was struggling a lot to bike there, but somehow managed to still do it. I didn't wait for another second before I started running. I ran so fast at full speed, and I have asthma, that I saw black and nearly collapsed. My lungs hurt so bad that I thought I was dying, but the adrenaline kept my blood running in my legs too. Once I glanced behind me and he was there, struggling badly to keep up his full speed on the field, with that ugly smile and the way too little bike. After that, I just ran like crazy until I found a house. I hid in their yard without even minding that I was in somebody else's yard. It didn't matter to me in that moment at all. I waited a while with my breathing still stuck in my throat, but he didn't come. I was planning to yell so loudly as I could if he found me, but he never did. At some point, the adrenaline started leaving my system and I left my hiding spot. I ran again until I reached an area which had multiple people in the yard so that I would have some help if I saw him again, but luckily I did not. I typed 911 into my phone, but I couldn't bring myself to call, mostly because I didn't have any proof, and I didn't want my parents to find out because they are overprotecting, so I wouldn't probably leave my house anymore. I still lived with them. I've been paranoid about this incident ever since, and my dog was frightened too. I guess she noticed that something was really off. I swear to God that I will always listen to my gut when it's telling me something from now on. I'm still scared of that man. I've expected to randomly spot him in some area, and I just think about what he could have done to me, and I'll never forget his awful smile. I feel like he's gonna jump on my window one night and do what he wants to me. I feel paranoid and helpless. I'm still thinking about calling the police. A 35-year-old female used to work at a small startup that had a small warehouse in the city. I enjoyed it because it had great benefits, perks, and a pretty easy commute. I just walked a few blocks to the metro line in our city. Usually I worked the day shift, so my walk to the station wasn't too bad. I just encountered a normal city life. On the occasional time that I worked into the night, I usually walked with some coworkers I knew, or then my boyfriend would come and pick me up. If I had to make the walk by myself, I would wear giant headphones to deter catcalls and any other annoyances. I had a doctor's appointment that morning and I was allowed to make up my shift by staying after the day shift crew had left. However, I finished my shift before the rest of the evening crew, which meant that I made the walk by myself that day. It was already dark and the street was pretty much deserted, except for this one really tall, burly dude walking just ahead of me yelling into his phone. I had my headphones on but nothing playing because I still wanted to be aware of my surroundings. The big burly guy sounded angry and didn't turn back to look at me until after he had yelled into the phone. I did my part and now it's up to you to get rid of the body. I don't care what you gotta do, just make it disappear. And then he turned around and stopped walking, looking at me surprised. I quickly stopped to not run into him and give an awkward grimace and smile, acting like I hadn't just heard him say that because I was listening to music. At the next crosswalk, I quickly crossed the street. He just stared, standing in place until I was a block away, and then he turned the corner and disappeared. I don't know if this guy actually knew that I was behind him and said that to scare me because he thought that I was listening into his conversation. I hope. Or he was up to no good. But that was super creepy. I've never walked to the metro when it was dark after that by myself. I either got a ride or had a buddy walk with me.